Today we'll be working on a trip to the beach, untangling the mystery of algal blooms in the Great Lakes. This is an NSF-funded case study, so National Science Foundation funded project here. A very nice case study that illustrates many points. Now there's two drawbacks to it. One is if you flip to page 4, you'll notice that the graph x-axis, well, it tops out in year 2012. So this isn't exactly up to date. We're missing some data, some current data, but I think it will still get us where we need to go, just asking some questions and using some scientific thought here. The second thing is that it is a little contrived, so the story's a little cutesy, but if you can get around both of those, you're doing great here. Let's go ahead and start. So Max and Flora are college sophomores studying biology, so they're both very interested in biology already. Max's family owns a beach cabin, and Max hasn't been there for a little while, so a few years. It's changed, and when they start walking down the beach, they realize, oh, yuck, it smells bad, and there's piles of brown goop, lots of goop, and that wasn't how Max remembered it, so something has changed over the last few years. They're not quite sure what's going on, and they decide to investigate a little bit further. So he goes back and speaks with his family, and they tell him that for the past 2 years, so that's our timeline here, quantities of green algae has washed up on the beach. The rotting algae formed stinking clumps along the shore. Fewer tourists, so this is the problem here, is our tourism industry has been impacted. And because of that, their neighbors are worried about the impact on the value of their lake property. So lake property here, you may have maybe in the 1950s had your family buy into some sort of property, enjoy it, but also think about, man, if we had hard times, we could sell that. And that could be kind of an insurance or a backup pool of money that we could tap into. So just keeping that value up is going to be in your best interest. Tourism is multifactorial here. So when we think about tourism dollars in the state of Wisconsin, we're in the billions from just fly fishing alone. And I don't know the exact figure to date, but $60 billion is kind of the direction that we were headed at one point. And if we were to lose that, you don't just lose the revenue that you would get through the Department of Natural Resources, so the DNR, but you'd also have those tourists, well, they wouldn't be eating out at the little mom and pop restaurants, or they wouldn't be sleeping in the hotels, they wouldn't be buying worms, they wouldn't be buying other things that they need to go out and enjoy the environment. So if you're a boater or if you're a hiker or something on that line, you won't be maybe spending money in these locations that don't have any other source of revenue. So no large industry or other things that might bring in revenue. So let's keep going on this. They decide to take their inquiry up another level. So Aunt Janet works for the Department of Natural Resources, and already I alluded to this. So this is the DNR, and if you have not visited their website, I highly recommend it. DNR has a national website, but they also have state DNR websites, and they have maps for hiking trails, they have species guides, so if you're going, what is that bird? They do have guides for that, and many other things, including some of our invasive species data. So we're going to use this later on in the class as well, coming back to DNR and their resources that your tax money pays for. Let's take a look at the questions now. What could have caused a recent increase in the amount of algae washing up on the beach? Brainstorm a list of possibilities. I'm going to give you a moment, and on the next slide, we'll kind of go through some of the common things that we'll usually brainstorm. Okay, we're back and looking at the questions here. What could have caused a recent increase in the amount of algae washing up on the beach? Brainstorm a list of possibilities. Usually people think about fertilizer runoff first. So fertilizer, that's definitely one of the many things we should consider here. And when we talk about fertilizer, if you've ever purchased fertilizer, on the bag it's going to have some letters, some chemicals going on here. So carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, sometimes you'll see that as well. But the big offenders in terms of algal blooms are nitrogen and phosphorus, or phosphates. And we have seen this cause a lot of growth in green organisms, which is great if you're trying to grow crops, but not if you do not want to grow algae. So the algae will respond to this too. It's like a giant vitamin pill. The other impact that we're seeing climate-wise is possibly a change in temperature. So temperature change could either be an increase or a decrease. People forget that temperature could be a decrease. Now, I don't believe it's so in this situation, but I can't rule it out here, so we're going to have to look at some data. The third thing that people have come up with, usually when looking at maybe how things have changed, is possibly the water movement. So what this could be is that as the summer goes on and water evaporates out of this lake, maybe the small, shallow parts don't move as much. So they get a little bit more stagnant, they get a little bit more shallow, things don't wash around and mix as much, and they really encourage a lot of growth. We'll see. Water movement also could be incoming water into the system. So we see in the Mississippi, especially in the spring, a great increase because we have a lot of melt and runoff that will run off of the hills and hit the Mississippi, and we get the surge of water. And it can really get going quite fast, and it might be brushing things and cleaning stuff off the side. We'll investigate this further in the rest of the packet here.